Hello everyone. So in today's video, we are going to learn about prompt engineering and its various techniques which will help us get the desired output in lesser iterations and also prevent the wastage of tokens by having the correct knowledge of using the perfect technique for the respective use case. So let's dive deep into it. So right now you are seeing the blog published by Claude on best practices for prompt engineering, and this can be applied to any AI model given the fundamentals remain the same. So let's try to understand what is prompt engineering. It is a way of structuring our instructions to get the desired output. It consists of how we phrase our queries, how we specify the tone of our response, how much context we are providing about the topic, and how are we specifying the output format to get the desired output. And you have often realized that you need to do multiple back and forth to the AI model to get to the correct intent and output. But if we provide the perfect prompt with the proper context, then we can get the desired result in a single shot. However, prompt engineering is also an essential element of context engineering. So, along with designing the perfect prompt engineering technique, we also need to structurize our context so that LM can pick the right context as per the user query. So let's explore one of the core techniques being utilized in the better prompts, and one of them is being specific and clear. So we might have realized that before we give any task, the LLM tries to prefill the missing information with its assumption, which requires us to perform multiple back and forth to come up with the right intent and hence the right output. We can prevent this by asking LLM to prepare a list of questions before performing any task so that it can help him fill in the proper context before beginning to any task and hence provide any assumption or hallucinations. So here being explicit and clear means we need to instruct model what we exactly want. We can't just provide vague instruction and let the model pre-fill the assumption with correct prediction. So instead of saying very vague instruction like create an analytical dashboard, we need to explicitly add more information to it by saying include as many relevant features and interactions as possible and go beyond the basics to create a fully feature implementation. Some of the best practices for being explicit and clear is lead with direct action words, which is write, analyze, generate, and create. We often start with a prompt like I am thinking of writing. So instead of adding more words, it actually leads to more tokens. Be explicit and clear, like write a following essay in a following manner, and so on. We need to skip some preambles and get straight to the request. State what you want the output to include, not just what to work on, and be specific about the quality and depth expectations. So this is like talking to a junior who might have the correct knowledge but not a clear direction. And if we give any task to any junior, we know that if we don't give the perfect information, they might take any assumption and perform the wrong task. So this is like similarly with AI. Then the next thing is providing proper context and motivation. As we know, if we don't provide the context, the LM might have not the perfect knowledge and hence might hallucinate. And including the motivation is essential because explaining why something matters helps AI models better understand your goals and deliver more targeted responses. So let's say take an example of formatting preferences. Less effective prompt could be never use bullet points. Now we can improve this prompt by saying I prefer responses in a natural paragraph rather than bullet points because I find now here we have first of all included some kind of a little context and hence the reasoning or motivation because I find flowing prose easier to read and more conversational. Bullet points feel too formal and least like for my casual learning style. So when do we need to actually provide context? When we need to explain the purpose or audience for the output, clarifying why certain constraints exist, describing how the output will be used, and indicating what problem we are trying to solve. Now next technique comes is being specific, which is structuring our instructions with explicit guidelines and requirements. The more specific we are to our instruction, the better would be the results. And if you try to compare this prompt engineering with talking to your team member, you will find very similar common points. If we are not being specific to our instructions, the teammate might take any assumption and might take a wrong approach to the solution. Similar cases with the AI. If we are being specific in our instructions, it will help AI understand our requirement and hence decide the proper solution to achieve the target. One of the example here is let's say for meal planning. So vague instruction could be like create a meal plan for a particular diet. Now we can be specific by including more details into it, saying design a particular diet meal plan for pre-diabetic management. We are now mentioning this much calories daily, emphasis on glycemic foods, list breakfast, lunch, dinner, and one snack with complete nutrition breakdowns. Now you can see we are being very specific on what we want so that LLM don't take any assumption and has the proper context to perform the response. So we need to understand what makes a prompt specific enough. It can be like giving clear instructions, which can be word count, format, timeline, then to provide relevant context so it can understand the goal, then to give the desired output structure, which is in the form of table, list, paragraph, or maybe word doc, and any requirements of restrictions which it needs to take care of. So now next thing comes is using an example. Even for a humans, it is very easier to understand any topic if we are given a proper example to it, and hence similar cases with AI. So when we are giving some instruction, maybe a requirement, if we provide a single example which is a perfect one, then it can do our job very well. We can provide more examples to the AI, but if a single perfect example can do our job, then it will help us save tokens. So these are actually known as single shot prompt and few shot prompting also. So one of an example is article summarization. So instead of giving a vague prompt which is summarize this article, we can be more explicit by giving an example. Like here's an example of summary style I want. So here we have actually included the article, the link to the article, summary, like how can the summary would be for this particular article. And now we are giving the specific instruction which is now summarize this article in the same style, and hence our new link. So when to use the example, the desired format is easier to show than describe. You need a specific tone or style. The task involves subtle patterns or conventions, and simple instructions have not produced consistent results. So you may start with zero shot, which is not providing any example, and see if you are getting the proper result. If not, then try to give a one best example to it. If not, then try to include some more examples covering other scenarios or more edge cases. So the next thing comes is giving permission to LLM to express uncertainty. And this is what we have talked about in the first place. We need to ask LLM to prepare a list of questions which will help it clarify the doubts and not prefill any assumptions in the first place. And this is the same thing. Give AI the explicit permission to express uncertainty rather than guessing. This will reduce hallucinations and increase reliability. One of the example could be analyze this financial data and identify trends. If the data is insufficient to draw conclusions, say so rather than speculating. Now there are some advanced prompt engineering techniques which may be beneficial for developers also. So let's explore it. One of them is pre-filling the AI's response. Now when it comes to developer or any kind of, let's say, even for designers, we require some specific output format, which maybe a developer can require a JSON output. So we need to pre-fill the response in the first place itself. Now what do I mean by pre-filling? Let's explore it. So pre-filling helps us start the response for it by guiding the format, tone, or structure. This is specifically powerful for enforcing output formats or skipping any preambles. When we can use pre-filling, which is you need the AI to output JSON, XML, or other structured formats. We may want to skip the conversational preambles and get straight to content. We know like the LLM has its habit of, okay, I got your point and all. So we can skip those points and we can directly jump to the output. So in that case, we can use this. We need to maintain a specific voice or character, and we need to control how the AI is going to respond. So one of the example is enforcing JSON output. Now there are some code related things, which is you can see a messages array with the role of user and the role of assistant, and you can clearly see we have told the LLM to extract the name and price from this product description into JSON. Now sometimes LLM might skip this instruction and start with, okay, here is your JSON, and then it may produce an error by not giving a proper JSON format. So here we have explicitly begin our content with this curly braces, which is an annotation for JSON. And hence now the AI will continue from the opening braces, outputting only valid JSON. Now the next thing comes is chain of thought prompting. You might have used Claude and you might have seen the reasoning it gives before starting with the response generation. And here is the same thing, which is it requires step-by-step reasoning before answering. And this technique helps with complex analytical tasks that benefit from structured thinking. So instead of jumping right into response generation, the LLM takes time. It performs some chain of thought prompting, and by having a proper reasoning technique, it comes up with the conclusion of going with the proper approach. So one of the modern approaches you might have explored is Claude offers an excellent thinking feature that automates the structured reasoning. We can perform a same by providing a manual chain of thought in the prompt itself, which we will now explore. So when we can use chain of thought, when abstract thinking is not available, you need to be transparent reasoning that you can review. The task requires multiple analytical steps, and you want to ensure the AI considers specific factors. So here are some basic chain of thought where that we can explore is by we can add simple instruction of things step by step. So you can see an example, and right now ignore this XML or let's say tag based prompting, which we will explore in the end. So you can see we have included things step by step before you write the email. This will actually help the LLM to not begin with response generation and explicitly mentioning to use chain of thought prompting. Second is guided chain of thought. Now, if you observe this example, we are kind of structuring our prompt to provide specific reasoning stages. Earlier, it was we are giving full freedom AI to think whatever they want, but right now we are giving specific reasoning stages, which is think before you write the email. First, think through what messaging might appeal to this donor, giving their donation history. Third comes consider which aspects of the Care for Kids program would resonate with them. And finally, write the personalized donor email using your analysis. So this is how we are guided each step at particular stage. Now the last comes is a structured chain of thought. Now we are going to use text to separate reasoning from the final answer. So here it is kind of a role of context engineering also, which is think before you write the email in thinking text. So wherever a response is generated, it will keep the reasoning content in the thinking text. You might have seen it earlier also, which is it will keep thinking here and then keep the details over here, which is the reasoning content. So here are some steps of controlling the output format, which is telling AI what to do instead of what not to do. So instead of saying don't use markdown in your response, try to say your response should be composed of smoothly flowing prose paragraphs. So it is basically saying you need to give in a paragraphs format. Then match your prompt style to the desired output. One of the ways you can give your example, as we have explored earlier, and being explicit about the formatting preferences. So you can see like don't use order list or unordered list, and instead of listing them with bullets, incorporate them naturally into sentences. So even we might get the perfect content, but we may need to again reiterate for the perfect output. So this is what is all about. So here comes the prompt chaining. So there are some complex tasks which can't be done in a single iteration, and hence the single prompt. And that this is what is being meant by prompt chaining. You break down the complex task into a smaller chunks of tasks, and then you give a specific prompt for that particular task. So here one of the best things could be it performs each task properly, but it may increase latency, which is multiple API calls, but it gets a job done. So you can see this approach trades latency for higher accuracy by making each individual task easier. This can be implemented in workflows or programmatically, but we can manually provide the prompts after receiving responses. So you can be like for research summary, you can give first prompt like summarize this article into by covering following aspects. Second prompt could be review the summary above for accuracy and completeness by providing some proper graded feedback. Third prompt could be improve the summary based on this feedback, which is kind of a reiteration that we have talked earlier. So when can we use prompt chaining? When we have a complex request that needs to be worked on, when we need iterative refinement, when we are doing multiple stage analysis, the next thing could be intermediate validation adds value, obviously, and a single prompt produces inconsistent results. So trade-offs, as I told you, it involves multiple API calls, but best thing is it gets the job done. So there are some techniques we might have heard about and which we have already explored earlier. One of them was XML text for structure, and this is how we are now structuring our context as we discussed earlier. So XML text are a recommended way to structurize the context, which will help provide clarity on prompts to the LLM. So let's say we are having multiple contexts. Let's say there are multiple paragraphs resonating to a specific context. So we can break them down. Like for in this example, we are breaking the athlete information in this XML tag, and then we are saying generate a meal plan based on that lead. So when LLM now goes to this prompt, it will say see that this there is an XML tag considering this is a section. So it will have its in memories that for athlete information, I can go to this section and then review the information. So when can my XML be helpful? When we are working with extremely complex prompts, mixing multiple types of content. This is a way of context engineering. Next thing would be we need to be absolutely certain about content boundaries and when we are working with older model versions because modern models are better in understanding which context is about what topic and all, and hence we may not require, but always XML gives us the more control on reducing the hallucination and all. Right now we are just structure the prompts by giving some spaces and by breaking down into paragraphs, which can also be helpful. Then next thing which you might have explored is role prompting, which is giving a perfect persona as per the requirement and get the output in a specific tone. So one of the example could be you are a financial advisor. We have now given a role and then the task which is analyze this investment portfolio. We may not need to over constrain the role, which is you are a helpful assistant is often better than you are a world renowned expert who only speaks in technical jargon and never makes any mistakes. Over specify the role can limit the AI's helpfulness. So when role prompting might be helpful, we need consistent tone across many outputs. We are building an application that requires a specific persona. We want some domain expertise framing for complex topics. So putting it all together, we can combine multiple techniques for our use case by going through this example, like extract key financial metrics from this, which is a task in JSON format. Right now we are being specific and clear. I need this data for automatic processing. Now we are giving the intent and motivation that why we are doing it. Use this structure. You can see we have provided an example over here. And if any metric is not clearly stated in report, use null rather than guessing. We are being giving explicit and specific instructions to it. Begin your response with an opening brace here, which we have used another technique over here. And as I told you, we have used explicit instructions, we have provided the context, we have provided the example structure, we have given permission to express uncertainty, which is use null if unsure, and format control, which is begin with opening brace. So now we can understand how to choose the right techniques, which is to starting with is our request clear and explicit? If no, work on clarity first. Is the task simple? Then use core techniques only. Does does the task require specific formatting? If yes, then use examples or pre-filling. Is the task complex? If yes, then we will use chaining. Then does it require reasoning? If yes, then we will use external thinking or chain of thought. And here is a technique selection guide, which is if we want specific output format, we will use a particular technique, and hence for the same scenario that we have discussed earlier. You can go through this blog. I will share it in the description. You can check it out. And if you want to go dive deep into these prompt engineering techniques, there is a second documentation for prompting best practices where it gives or let's say provides a model based prompt. This is being very specific to Claude, but you can use this prompt engineering when you are using a specific model also. You can go through this link also. I will keep it in the description also by going through Opus 5 best practices, Opus 4.8 best practices, Sonnet, and so on. So this was it for today. And comment down how you like this video. And also if you like this video, like it and share it with your friends who might get beneficial for writing better prompts. And comment down the topic you need to learn in the next videos. Thank you.